From Pee-wee to Dumbo and everything in between, join us every Thursday in April for Filmography Tim Burton. Our 5-part season will break down all 19 of Burton's feature-length films to date in detail. Follow Filmography on Spotify or wherever else you find your podcasts.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Wherever you're listening from, I hope you subscribe right now to the series. Interviews come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and would love to keep you up to date on all of those. Of course, you can subscribe anywhere you get your favorite podcasts from, like iTunes and Apple Podcasts, but as well as YouTube and Spotify. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest, one of my all-time favorite artists who I've been lucky to have on the series before, Sheryl Crow. We're here this time to talk about her brand new record, Threads, which carries maybe one of the greatest guest lists in history. This is a collaborations record, and we'll be talking about the collaborations with folks like Keith Richards, Stevie Nicks, Neil Young, Willie Nelson, Emmylou Harris, James Taylor, Joe Walsh, Don Henley, Jason Isbell, Gary Clark Jr., and Margot Price, as well as the folks who she's joined by on the first 2 singles. On Redemption Day, it's the late, great Johnny Cash, and we'll hear about how she wrote this song back in the 90s for one of her records, what it meant to her then, to when Johnny Cash decided to record his version before he passed away, and what it meant to him at that point, both center around the wars of that era, and then what it speaks to today. And for the second single to the new record, Livewire, she's joined by Bonnie Raitt and Mavis Staples, 2 artists, 3 including Sheryl, who have spent their lives not only writing amazing music, but fighting for the rights of people through their activism. From there, we're going to turn the clock back for some big round number anniversary fun. And for Sheryl Crow, that means Woodstock. She's one of the few artists who's played 2 versions of it, 1994 and in 99. They were very different experiences for her. And if you know any of the history of the 90s Woodstocks, you'll understand where she's going. But she's going to take us back through both of those sets and what they meant to her at the time. Talking about the new album, Threads, it's Kyle Meredith with Sheryl Crow.
Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Let's get into Threads. So, here we are talking last year, and you tell me about this final album that you're going to do, and we're finally here. I feel like I've been waiting forever, even though it's not even been a year, but all the excitement built up around this. The whole thing, this is a collaborations record, as you've said, and the names are huge. I think you've done more collaborations than any other artist that I'm aware of, like in the history of music.
Well, to be honest, I think I might be probably one of the artists who's been around the longest, and that may be why you're equating me with a lot of collaborations. I've been around a long time. I'll be honest with you, I've been really lucky. When I first came out, I really was not embraced by my peer group. My peer group was like Billy Corgan and Beck and Hole and, of course, the whole Seattle scene, and I was definitely not embraced by that scene. I was kind of embraced by the people that have inspired me, like Clapton and the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan and Felton. A lot of those people championed me, and so I've just had the good fortune of having opportunities to play with those people through the years. And so this record really is kind of an homage to the people that were there in the early days. They were the people that inspired me as a kid. And also, it's sort of my opportunity to acknowledge and collaborate with people I think are going to be around for a long time and who have picked up that baton of live music and songwriting and musicianship and who are going to carry it forward.
Of course, it started with St. Vincent. I see Isbell. He's part of this too, right?
Oh, yeah. Jason Isbell is just crazy great. And in fact, he was in my studio yesterday, and he's so talented. I don't think people even realize what a great guitar player he is. But he's on it. Chris Stapleton, who's amazing and is one of my favorite writing partners. Margot Price, Brandy Carlisle, Maren Morris, Underday, Gary Clark Jr. I feel like that's the hopeful look at the future of music.
And it's an insane list because here you're just talking about the newer class, and then you bring up the older class in there with Keith Richards and Stevie Nicks, Neil Young, Willie Nelson, Emmylou Harris, James Taylor, Joe Walsh, Don Henley. I mean, I would feel like every moment is a pinch me moment, but has there been like the craziest time in the studio?
Oh my! I mean, it's all pinch me moments, and actually, the big pinch me moment is the Johnny Cash collaboration and the way it turned out, and the profundity of the moment. You know, that song coming out now, and what's happening, not only in America but kind of in the evolution of civilization. I know that sounds like really heady, but I mean, just the way we're treating each other and our lack of compassion and even ethics to a certain extent. It's hard for me to hear him singing those words and not feel extremely emotional. So, there's a lot of that on this record. There's a lot of, I hear Eric playing Beware of Darkness and it makes me cry. So, I guess in a weird way, I've been around a long time, but this is what music has meant to me. It still moves me. It still makes me feel. And that's what I want it to feel like. I want my kids to feel that way about music. So I guess that's the whole point.
Yeah. And with Redemption Song, I mean, as you're saying, it is such a powerful moment. I think you were going in this direction already, but, so here's a song that you had released in the 90s, and then Johnny does his version of it, and now you've paired it together. What did that song mean to you when you first wrote it, and does it mean anything different now?
Well, I need to backtrack a little bit. Before I write records, oftentimes I'll sit down with my Bob Dylan, or I used to do this. I'd sit down with my Bob Dylan lyrics book, and it would sort of just get the juices flowing. And I would always be shocked at how his songs, even though he wrote them in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s, they still pertain to today. And in a perfect world, that's what you want your songs to do. You want them to be timeless. Not all of them are going to be timeless. But with Redemption Day, I wrote it in 96. I wrote it after having gone over and played for the troops in Bosnia. And I felt like when I put it out in 96, it needed to be heard then. And then cut to 2002, when Johnny recorded it, he really felt the same. He's like, I'm recording this. I feel like it's important that people hear it right now. We were, I think maybe, I'm not sure if we were in the Persian Gulf, or I'm not sure where we were at, but he was so adamant about this. It's going to be the cornerstone of my album. It's important that people hear it right now. And then it didn't come out for years because he passed away, and his record label, I think, held on to it for a while. So now it's coming out, and I feel like it's really found its moment because of what we're going through and just the attack on truth. And to hear Johnny singing about what freedom really is, that we're born into freedom, knowing what he stood for, the fact that he was, against the Iraq War, he was against the Vietnam War, he stood up for Native Americans. It just, the song, I think, really has found its moment.
The first two times with you writing it the first time, with Johnny the second time, both really centered in on wars. It is interesting this time that it's not exactly a physical war, two countries warring out there that it's speaking for, but it sort of starts speaking for humanity in a crisis that we're in. It's whether it's political or women's rights and the abortion topic. I mean, it is amazing and unfortunate in a powerful way how it still speaks to this moment.
Yeah, I guess so. For me, the end of the song is where the hope lies. Mm-hmm. The fact that, just the line of it's where a baby cries. I mean, the fact is we are born in freedom, and the freedoms that we enjoy hold a certain responsibility, and that we all share in that freedom. Some of us don't get more freedom than other people. That's not the way it should be. As we experience a loss of freedom, with the abortion situation, or even a loss of freedom where guns are concerned, it's a loss of freedom for kids to not be able to go to the movies, or to be able to go to school and know that they're safe. All those ideas, I think if we step back and look at what freedom really means, we really have to rewrite how we're conducting ourselves. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think this is a real telltale time in our history for sure.
I'll move on using that to the second single with Livewire, because here you have two artists who have spent their entire careers talking about Bonnie Raitt and Mavis Staples saying mm-hmm. these things too. I mean, really, waving this flag hard. To have the three of you all on a song, I mean, I'll use the topic again. The thread between all three of you all is so powerful as to how you've done your careers.
Well, and that's a true pinch me moment. I got turned on to the Staples singers really by osmosis. I mean, all their songs were a part of the fabric of my growing up. I mean, they were the soundtrack, and I don't think there was anyone that wasn't familiar with their tunes tunes. And then, of course, The Last Waltz came out, and you got to see young Mavis singing the Raitt. And obviously we all know what Bonnie has stood for through the years as well with her No Nukes. And also I went and saw her when I was 17. She was the first woman I ever saw who played a guitar as if it was just an extension of her voice. And that's what sort of gave me permission to pick up a guitar and think I could do that. So there's so many moments on this that I feel like are just, I mean, it's just a tiny bit of my gratitude. There's no way I can ever pay for or pay them for what they've done, what they've inspired in me, not only as a woman and not only as an activist, but just as an artist. So, yeah, I mean, it's just dream come true.
And listening to that, I mean, Bonnie slides sounding as good as ever, and when Mavis comes in, I mean, talk about a huge second chapter, third chapter, whatever she's in right now. But both of those artists just, you know, I mean, every career goes in peaks and valleys and waves, but, you know, that's a huge moment for both of those.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Mavis has been working with Tweety for a while now. She just worked with Ben Harper, and there's a whole new wave of energy that young people are hip to her, you know, and that want to be a part of her immense talent and want to push that forward. Bonnie has had, I mean, she's, my goodness, she's like a cat. I would say I'm a cat with 9 lives. She's a cat with 9 lives. She's been around for a long time, and she's had so many great mountaintops in her career, and she just keeps going. And for me, you know, I feel really blessed. I got a little bit of a late start as far as my notoriety. I was already, you know, pushing 30 when my first record came out, and I've had it, you know, 27 years, and I feel like I still am valid, you know, even though radio is so youth-oriented. In fact, everything is youth-oriented and perfection and youthful beauty and all that kind of thing. And I think there's, you know, Joe Walsh and I wrote this song called These Still Are the Good Old Days. Just because you're older doesn't mean that you're not valid anymore, you know, and I love that, like Mavis and Bonnie and Emmy Lou still doing the best work. And that's what gives me hope. I feel like, hey, I can keep doing this. I can keep writing and playing and still be inspired and still put my best foot forward and still matter.
I'm glad you said those words. I need you to say those words because I'm a fan, and I need you to say those words.
Oh, thank you so much.
With the rest of this record, with the songs we haven't heard yet, I mean, are they all co-writes? You know, how did this work with you? Or are there more covers or any covers?
Well, we started the album out actually with Chris Christopherson. He was kind of the inspiration of the record, and we did Border Lord, which was one of his tunes. I wrote a song for Willie with a buddy of mine, Shane McAnally. I wrote, you know, the Livewire and the song for Emmy Lou. I wrote for them, with them in mind, and I wrote those with Jeff Trott. Joe Walsh and I wrote a tune together, Story of Everything, which has my buddy Chuck D on it and Gary Clark on Today. I wrote that with Steve, and we wrote that, you know, actually that was sort of in response to what was going on politically, and it just laid itself out like, oh, we got to get Gary, and I want to get Chuck, and, you know, it was very organic. I had, you know, just certain things in mind and certain things that I kind of wrote for those people.
So, I know we only got a few minutes here, and I always tend to do the anniversaries. I've been asking a lot of artists who have played some of the Woodstocks to share some stories, but you're one of the few that's actually played a couple of those. You played a couple of the Woodstocks.
That's right, and was alive for the first one. 94 was a game changer for me. You know, it was very new, and when I came off stage from Woodstock, the trajectory of my career changed at that moment. I mean, it was the moment where there was a moment, oh, who is this artist? And everything really did change for me. I mean, you can ask anybody that was around for it that it was before YouTube, and people wrote about it and found out about it, and word of mouth traveled, and it really did change my career. I suddenly was on the map. The second one was kind of an unpleasant experience. It was just, I don't know if it was a matter of it being poorly run, but it didn't have the spirit of Woodstock. People were overcharged, couldn't bring in their own food or water. They were overcharged for food and water. It was extremely hot. It just was a nightmare, and just a very unpleasant experience. So I hope I think that the 50th anniversary one, the one that they're doing with Santana, I think hopefully it will get back to the spirit of the original, or even to the 94 one. 99, hopefully that one will just kind of fade off into some sort of smoky recollection. It was pretty bad.
You had a good set. I've recently watched it again on YouTube because it's all up there, and I feel like you had a good set at least in '99. Yeah.
We had a good set, but kids were throwing mud up on stage, and because the porta potties were leaking, it wasn't just mud. I mean, it was very unpleasant. They were throwing pennies on stage. Andy Dick came out before us and did a really extremely foul set. It just wasn't a good. I think right after us was Clown. What is it? Clown Posse.
Yeah.
What was that?
Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah. Insane Clown. It just didn't have the spirit. It didn't have the continuity or the spirit. And I think it just was poorly run. There were kids out there that were passing out left and right. A lot of topless girls. It just was really just for us on stage watching it. It wasn't enjoyable, but we did play our hearts out, even though there was just all kinds of stuff. Like I can remember playing bass and having mud hit my hand on the bass and having to actually ask the audience to quit throwing mud. So there you go.
Yeah.
I loved the first one. The first one was just incredible to walk out on stage and see, 100,000 people or however many people were there, and to walk off stage knowing that was the biggest moment I had ever in my life of playing music. It was just really, I have a great memory of that. So that's the memory I hold.
Well, I know it's a name that's meant something and captured imaginations. I'm hopeful that we're in the period where it can again. And I do want to tie that back around because I think that speaks for this record, Threads, too. I mean, it is a time and a place for an album like this, and I so appreciate that you've done it, and really just amazing songs.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That makes me want to cry. Thank you. It's funny. I don't know. I was around when people bought records and they held the actual physical copy, and it's hard to know if people will hear the whole thing, if they'll hear one or two songs. But all I know in my heart is that it has meant more to me making the record and anything that can come out of it. So hopefully people will enjoy it when and if they hear it.
I certainly will be, and I appreciate you taking me along for the journey on it, too.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for talking with me.
Anytime. We'll see you around. Take care out there.
Okay, we'll see you in Louisville.
My thanks, as always, to Sheryl Crow. Again, the new record is called Threads. Now, if you're a frequent listener of this series, you know that back in 2018, I talked to Sheryl Crow, and she broke a little news that ended up being very big news across the music world. At the time, she had just released a single with St. Vincent, Miss Annie Clark, called Wouldn't Want to Be Like You. And as we were talking about it, she was telling me about her upcoming record, the one that you just heard about, Threads, that it would be her final album. Not that she's quitting songs, but that she just wasn't going to make any records anymore. It was a very big deal. So I want to include that interview here for you again. So you don't have to dig deep into the series. I'm going to make it easy for you. We also talk about some fun things like how Bob Dylan became a mentor to her. And then, using her word, I also thread together several albums from throughout her career that were not only celebrating their own anniversaries last year, but that had a lot of similarities between each other's. And that's the records Detour, The Globe Sessions, and her debut Tuesday Night Music Club. Part 2 of Kyle Meredith with Sheryl Crow.
How are you, Kyle?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you, too.
We got a lot to talk about. No, I do want to jump in the time machine, but you went and surprised the world recently with a brand new single, which paired two of my favorite artists of all time together, you and St. Vincent, Annie Clark, and this single, Wouldn't Want to Be Like You. It's so good.
Thank you. I'm just thrilled that people are noticing it. It's really been an awesome thing. I love Annie. I'm a big fan. I sent her this track, and she was like, "Yes, let me add it." And she just brought all of her brilliance to it, and it really, I think, created an edge there that is so synonymous with the meaning of the song. So it's fun to play live, and I can't wait to play it with her. And we're psyched.
Is there any other backstory? I mean, what you're talking about, I feel like is the obvious stuff here, but where did this song come from? When did it happen?
Yeah, I've been in the studio just off and on when I felt like being in the studio, and that's been great. My studio is it's in my barn, actually, above horse stalls, and so I have the convenience of being able to just go down and write and create when I felt like it, and I have really felt like it a lot lately. It's a luxurious time to be an artist if you want to write about, what's going on. There's a lot to write about, and just this climate of the truth not mattering has really been unnerving to me, especially when you're raising kids, and you're trying to explain that no matter how painful it is, the truth is the most important thing. And so, it just started with that. It started with all these stories swirling around after the president was elected, just, about the idea of how much wealth there is out there and how many people are getting away with becoming wealthy on the backs of other people, and how at the end of the day, people are just going to believe what they're told by the person that they support. And it's very alarming. It's a very alarming time.
It does. It feels like our information is hijacked in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
It's how do you get it back?
And, my whole thing has always been, do your research, find reputable places to inform yourself. But in this day and age, it's really the Wild West with technology giving us the opportunity to get news in a gazillion different ways. And it doesn't always, it's not always the truth. And it's impossible to discern what is true and what isn't. And it's not like the old days where you went to the New York Times or whatever your reputable source was, you could find out, the truth. So it's there's a lot to write about. It's great fun to go in the studio and just kind of mix it up. And I'm especially glad that people are latching onto the song, because it is just a tale of what line can kind of get you into. I mean, eventually, I think always the truth comes out. The truth always does come out. So that's kind of the story of the song.
Now, this does come off the on the heels, I guess, of another one-off single you released. Was it late in the year last year with the Dreaming Kind? This sort of, is this the new MO for you? Just these little one-off singles that you're talking about? Because I also noticed that there's no label attached to this. This is just you putting these out.
Yeah, no, we're having a great experience with this company called STEM. We put out the Dreaming Kind on Bandcamp, and that was amazing. And that came on the heels of the shooting in Florida, and it was the 5-year anniversary of Sandy Hook. So I've got this record in the can that's going to come out next year, and it's a very collaborative record with people I've asked to collaborate with me, the people I've loved and have worked with and have been heroes of mine forever. And I have people like Stevie Nicks on it, and Keith Richards, and Joe Walsh, and Don Henley, who was one of the first people to give me a gig. Johnny Cash is on it. And I really love the record so much. But at the same time, I think, how would I follow that up with an album? And I do think that albums as an art form are kind of, a little bit of a dying art form, that people are more interested in singles. So I've sort of made the decision in my head that the record that comes out next year will be my last full album, and I'll just start putting songs out. And that feels good to me. It feels great not to spend the time in the studio to make a fully realized conceptual album, but just to put out really pertinent songs that feel immediate.
I mean, as a fan, to have these just keep rolling out, gimme, 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 I'm all for that. And I know it's about staying energized, for you. So that's exciting.
It is, yeah. It's. I came into the age of technology kicking and screaming. I mean, I was like holding on to my vinyl, like just, like it was Armageddon. I just so faithful about analog and people buying records and knowing who played on them. And slowly I've sort of dragged myself into the new age and really want to take advantage of the fact that it can make things really immediate, and it can give you the opportunity to be, sort of a musical tweet as opposed to a newspaper that when it comes out, it's already old. It can be very immediate. So I'm loving it.
Well, I do want to jump into the time machine because there's this great thread that works with a few of the anniversaries that you're having this year with your records. You've written topical your entire career. Obviously, these new singles are just the latest entry in that. Detours, which come out 10 years ago, I was looking back at that, and it's interesting because we were in the middle of the Iraq War at that point, and when I look, Peace Be Upon Us All, Babylon, Gasoline, like it seems to be telling the tale of the time. But then I looked at the very first song and it said, God Bless This Mess, and I thought, that's almost cute now. That's quaint. what we were looking at.
I know. And, and I was really careful about how I was saying things because I didn't want to ruffle any feathers. And now we're past the point where, for better or for worse, Trump kind of ushered in the new age of there should be no political correctness. So, in some ways, it gives artists like me, who've always been particularly artful and careful about saying things, the opportunity to just barf it out, for better or for worse. But God Bless This Mess was really a reference to the fact that we went into a war that was based on untruths or, not factual information. And now we see that kind of thing all the time, and yet we're not even really questioning it. So that song was, and that whole album really was inspired by what was happening at that time. And that time really seems much less daunting to me now than what it was at the time. I mean, at the time it seemed extremely alarming what was going on in the country. But wow, things have changed, and just got to keep writing.
I don't think you get enough credit as a protest singer, because I definitely think that should be tagged on to every time someone, throws out all of the accolades and everything for Sheryl Crow. But when I do talk to a lot of folks who do those type of songs, topical songs, protest songs, whatever you want to call it, there's this sort of idea that maybe if I write it now, I won't have to sing it in 5 or 10 years. And do you look back on these songs and think, I could totally bring those back in my set and they're completely going to work again?
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a habit of mine forever. I always pull out Bob Dylan songbooks before I make a record. There's something about his cadences, his tone. He's almost like the Bible in that you can pick up the Bible and you can point to something, and invariably the scripture will pertain to your immediate dilemma. It just seems like God is all in that. Well, I experience that when I pick up the Bible. I experience that when I pick up Bob Dylan. I read his lyrics and I think this stuff could be now. His questioning during the 60s, giving voice to a whole movement of people that were really asking questions and saying, look, we're not satisfied and we're overlooked and we're underserved. And all these songs could be now. And I guess as an artist, you hope for that. But for me, I'd love for all things to be wrapped up in a tidy bow and not ever have to sing songs that voice some kind of social unrest. But wow, what a humbling thing to be able to pull out a song from 10 years ago and feel like it still has a life and it still has pertinence. And it's a little bit of a catch-22, but a lot of those songs on that Detours record are still pretty representative. The fact that we're still embedded in this thirst for oil and gas. We're always talking about gas, and there's just so much of it that doesn't change. And the bottom line is that it just all comes down to money and greed. So, and that's biblical. That goes all the way back to biblical times too. So, it's just part of our humanity, I guess.
I'm gonna take the opportunity to seg there, talking about Dylan. The Globe Sessions turning 20 years old. You had a Dylan song on there with Mississippi. I've never known the story because you released that before he released his own version. Was that gifted to you? How did you end up with Mississippi?
Well, I've known Bob for a lot of years. I opened up for him at Roseland, and he offered up his friendship to me. And he's an outstanding mentor, I will tell you. I was making the Globe Sessions, and I thought I had finished it, and I got on an airplane. We had turned it in. It was called Wide. And I get on the airplane and I pick up USA Today, and it talks about the release of my record coming out called Riverwide, and I just felt this lump in my throat, feeling like this record is not done. It just doesn't feel done. And I got to the studio. I was working in New York at the Globe, and my manager, who's very good friends with Bob's publisher, as am I, great people Bob has around him, called and said, hey, Bob has 3 or 4 songs that he wanted to know if Sheryl wanted to take a listen to. And that was just like manna from heaven. And Mississippi, and they don't send it to you. They come over and they play it for you. So I heard the song and I was like, that's it, man. And that really breathed new fire and material into the new record. I wrote 2 other songs that went on that record, and it just really breathed some new life into it. But the funny thing about it is I recorded it best as I remembered, and we did it kind of up and kind of feeling like the Birds. And then years later, or a couple of years later, I saw him, and he had already put out, I think it was Time Out of Mind that had Mississippi on it, or maybe the next
Love and
record,
Theft.
I'm
It was,
not
yeah,
sure,
Love and Theft. Yeah.
Love and Theft, yes. And I said, well, how did you like Mississippi? How did you like our version? He goes, how did you like mine? I was like, I loved it. And this is very slow, but it's just, hey, that's a testament to a great song that it can be done in so many different ways with those kinds of lyrics and his brilliance with melody structure. So, yeah, I've just had these little tiny gifts dropped from heaven all through my career, and that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, and it's such a fun thing to listen to. We still throw that one on all the time. Around the house. I do love your version of that. And
thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that happened with the Globe Sessions. I mean, you ended up winning Best Rock Album at the Grammys the following year in '99 for this. It was self-produced. Was that the first time you went completely self-produced, or am I missing a credit there?
Well, the second record was self-produced, the Sheryl Crow record.
All right.
I went in to make my second record and had a lot of success on the first record and was pretty worn out and just a little cynical, and went in to make my record with my first producer, and I think he also was going through his own battles, and we worked for about a day, and then he decided he was going to go back home to California, and I was just in New Orleans, so I thought, well, I called my manager, and he said, hey, you demo your stuff all the time, and they sound like records. Just do what you do, and we'll figure it out later. And that's what we did. That's what that record was. It was just the product of being in New Orleans and having the urge to kind of prove myself as a fully realized artist.
And when you look back at it, I mean, because Tuesday Night Music Club, which I bring that up, 25th anniversary, that thing just keeps, trudging away right there. But, I know that it took a while for that one to light. Like, it took a few singles to catch on for that one. But for the second record, the self-titled one to, be on the heels of that success. I mean, the Globe Sessions, to me, I'd wondered, like now, was the confidence more there? Like, okay, it's all happened. I can come out, like, knocking this out of the park. I mean, what was the mood there as you're going into it?
Well, it's funny because this last record that I made called the Be Myself record, I went back and listened to some of those records because I wanted to just sort of examine. I don't listen to my records, so I kind of wanted to just re-examine what the spirit of those were, and it reminded me of what I was going through when I made the records. And if you're really open and you're doing you're writing your story, you can pretty much go back in time and relive what went into making that record. And the Globe Sessions was the result of, I think, having settled into my position as incredible. The first record, The Jury Was Still Out. The second record, it came on really strong and gave me the opportunity to say, look, I am a real artist. I do write, I do play, and I can produce. So the third record, I went into it with I'd gone through a really emotional breakup, and I was able to just kind of close the door and be that part of myself, which was, really vulnerable and a little bit heartbroken and a little more worldly, a little more wide-eyed than perhaps I was on my first two records. So, all that stuff kind of just spilled into that record.
It's always amazing when, from the fans' point of view, all you see is the success, never thinking about the balance of an artist's life as it's going on, like when all the good things are happening and something is falling apart personally.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I'm not a person that has ever enjoyed fame. I think some people are really built for it, and some people that really is what drives the machine. But for me, what always drove my machine was that I had all these people that I had aspire to be like Stevie, who's like the most fully realized artist I've ever known, and people like Dylan and great songwriters like Joni Mitchell. And I didn't want to be less than that. I wanted to make music that felt like it could be around for a long time. So the fame thing has always been sort of a strange, I don't know, kind of a strange experience for me.
Well, there's plenty of great singles that ended up on there. I mean, My Favorite Mistake, Anything But Down, a big favorite. Do you all ever talk about doing the deluxe editions for those records like Tuesday Night ended up having?
You know what? I'm really bad about looking backwards. I'm sure. In fact, the Tuesday Night Music Club record, that was the brainchild of the deluxe edition. Was the brainchild of, I guess, the record label and the managers. And I really don't even know. But I like the idea. There's always a reason that you don't put songs on an album. So to add stuff to a deluxe that you didn't really want on the record always feels a little bit like you're betraying yourself. I don't even know what's left over from the Globe sessions. I really don't know. Or for that matter, what was left over from the Detours. I've got like just a full-on trough of cassettes, unfortunately, back in the day, cassettes and DAT tapes and all that stuff, and 2-inch tapes of stuff that, just sits in vaults. So I'm sure that idea will be bandied about, and we'll see what comes of it.
It definitely worked for me for the Tuesday Night Music Club record because Killer Life ended up on there, and God, I loved that song. So.
Oh, and my gosh, a lot of that stuff I just totally forgot about. It's 25 years ago is a long time.
Yeah.
That was one of the shocking things about being at Bonneville and seeing all these young people singing songs that were older than them. I was in shock.
I saw that in your face. You kept commenting on that. I thought that was really funny.
Oh my goodness! Oh, I just didn't expect it at all, and we had such a great experience because there's just so much. I don't know. I just felt just total joy, and I felt like the audience, all these young kids came there with just a euphoric feeling, and man, it was a great day.
It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed that set. I'll end here. I want to trace sort of a line, maybe a dotted line back from the first album to the new single, because when I heard "Wouldn't Want to Be Like You," not as a direct reference, but my first thought was the Na Na song from the Tuesday Night Music Club.
Yeah, actually, just hearing you say that, there is sort of I guess, a little bit of unconsciously, a little bit of a little bit of a tie to that in the fact that it's sort of like a old school. Well, I guess by today's terminology it would be rap, but a talking blues kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very politically delivered. A lot of references. Gosh, there are a lot of references in the Na Na song, and definitely this song tells the tale of a lot of greedy people.
Well, it's the stuff that I've loved through your entire career. The Na Na was, but a big favorite of mine. Of course, I guess you'd call that a deep cut, but I like hearing those moments creep up with your new songs as well. So
I'm happy to feel like this feeling like a deep cut has made it out. It's really. I'm really tickled about it. So, and I have a lot of thanks to be throwing towards Annie Clark for bringing it.
If you guys ever want to collaborate on a live version of that song, put them both together. It's going to be great. I tell you, it's going to be great.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
I hope to hear
Okay,
that.
I'm gonna give you total credit when we do it.
Awesome. Sheryl Crow, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for talking with me again today, especially in about all the old stuff, but especially about the new stuff too.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, and I'll look forward to hearing all the new singles. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I hope you like them.
All right. Have a great one. Take care.
All right, take care. All right.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Sheryl Crow from my 2018 interview. And just to pull the trifecta here, I'm going to include one more. This was recorded the year prior to that one in 2017. Sheryl had just released her 10th studio album called Be Myself, which was one that was being billed as a return to her classic mid to late 90s sound. We talked about the record and the stories behind the songs and themes that run from love, politics, and death. It's part 3 of Kyle Meredith with Sheryl Crow. So I've listened to the record about, 24 times right now.
Oh my gosh,
and you've got
lot.
It's a good record.
Thank
You've done a great record.
Thank you. I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, I don't know that you've done a bad record.
Well, I've made some that were not as, perhaps as accessible or tolerable as others. But this one I'm really proud of. I actually really like this record. It feels like my second record and my third record. It feels like early days.
Yeah. When did you know? I want to go back. I want to start with the last record, though. That was the Nashville record, the country album, whatever you want to. Did you always know that was going to be a one-off, or was there a point where you said, I've done that, I don't need to do that again? It's not going to be a follow-up to that.
Well, what didn't suit me more than anything was the format, the country format. I had thought just from listening to the radio that probably the kind of music that I make was better suited for instead of a pop audience, for a mainstream audience, which is what country music generally seems to attract. But I realize that format is constructed so differently than what I'm used to at old school AAA pop rock
it's a
radio.
different world.
It's a different world. They expect a lot of the artists there. You have to be accessible 24. I mean, radio programmers have your phone number and text you, and I'm just not that person. I spent a lot of time doing free gigs in hopes that they would play me between 3 and 4 a.m. So it just didn't feel right for me. So no matter what kind of record I made, that format was not going to be one I could succeed at, because I couldn't be accessible like that. It's just, I got kids, I have a life, I didn't want to be.
Right. So that's when you get into this record. I mean, I know how the press takes a hook, and every album seems to, you've got to have that press story and everything, but you do the Rolling Stone interview and they're saying like, oh, this is her return to the roots, this is her 90s record again. And I'd like to say ahead of time that I guess I don't see that. I know you go back with an old producer and you go back to something that's comfortable.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear it that way. I heard this. I mean, you've got it. What's the title of the record?
Be Myself.
Be Myself. Like that is really what this to me is more about. Because you have the albums where, okay, I'm going to make the country album. I'm going to make the Memphis record. Like everything seems to have a theme that you're driving towards. And I don't know if you go into those records calling it that.
Yeah,
but
no, usually
it's
the record making process for me is kind of unknown. And then by the end of it, I feel like where I wind up with all the songs leads me to the title. And I had loved the music coming out of Memphis, and I grew up very near there and wanted to make that kind of record, but didn't really know exactly what it was going to be. So I had a lot of different records that have been kind of explorations of musical influences. But this record, my objective for it was just to go in and have a really fun time, like the old days where the studio was just like a laboratory / sanctuary where the outside world, was subjected to being outside the locked door. And Jeff and I, my old songwriting buddy, he and I wrote "Soak Up the Sun" and "If It Makes You Happy" and "Every Day Is a Winding Road" and "Favorite Mistake," that it would just feel like the old days where we went in and he had a guitar and I had a bass and we threw up a drum groove and wrote a bunch of songs. And that's really... that's how we made the old records, and it's how we made this one.
And that's it. It sounds really natural. And I guess that's what I'm getting to. It doesn't seem like you're trying to get back to a previous
not at
decade,
all.
which of any art form, I mean, music is the only one that really, you can be a time traveler. Songs are the way to time travel.
I think artists typically try not to repeat themselves. They try not to get stuck in a rut. And as a writer, as a performer, as a producer, I've always tried to keep growing. But this one was more conscientiously, let's go back to the way we used to make our records, which was just Jeff and I and either a drummer or a drum groove, and demo it, demo the songs, and then the demos were what went up on the record.
Yeah. And I guess that also explains, because there is a lot of references in there beyond Be Myself, Long Way Home. And that's what I didn't know. Like, what exactly is home? Is it what you're talking about, just getting back to that easy songwriting, or is there something completely different when that's specific?
Yeah, that song, Long Way Home, is really about the journey that brings you to the moment of now. And I have been all over the world, and I've had an extremely full life. I've had cancer, I've adopted kids, I've had numerous wonderful, intense relationships, some that ended poorly and some that ended great but didn't last.
And very public.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived 9 lives, and my life has never been better than it is right now. And that's, I guess, ultimately, it's what you go through to get to this moment that is what that this song is about.
I mean, how is it working for you then? Are you still writing as much? Were there lots more songs beyond this? Because this record does sound so natural and almost like these songs were hand selected because they fit each other so well.
There were a few songs left over, and I know they're using them for something, I don't know, but it was an easy record to make. I mean, granted, there were just, so many things to write about, creativity for me now exists between school drop-off and dinner time. So that is basically how we worked. I dropped the kids off at school, went down to the barn, which is right at down my driveway, and we would work until I'd pick up the kids at 3 and bring them back, and they would play in the barn, and then we'd walk up the hill and eat dinner at 6, and that was it. And it was great. It was very civilized, but nonetheless inspired.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I hear songwriters all the time talking about, where the song just kind of arrives out of the ether, but it almost sounds like with this, it's, the punch in the clock, if it's not there, is it hard that, like, you've got to chisel a bit more? I don't know.
Yeah, well, in the old days, I would go in with absolutely no ideas, and it would take months to make a record, and it would just be like gnashing of teeth and banging my head. And this one wasn't like that. I think mainly because I hadn't worked with Jeff in a while, and we just fell into this thing that we always had. But the lyrics for me, I just felt like there were so many things to talk about. And I wasn't even conscious about, okay, I'm going to write a song about this. I'm going to write a song about that. I said earlier, I kind of barfed them out, but it was kind of like that. It was just like venting kind of.
Yeah. And you can hear that too, because there's several themes going on lyrically that you're talking about in this. I started looking at some of these songs and then some of your back catalog, and I found that you have this favorite thing to write about that seems like it's how you relate to others. Not that you're so much an outsider, but there's sort of an opposition. Like, I don't know, that you feel like you don't fit in or something because, you call out the hipsters and the indie bands in this. I mean, is that accurate? Is that part of it?
Yeah, that goes all the way back to when I was a kid. I was always on the periphery of all the, of the cool group. I was always on the periphery of the great musicians. I was never quite there. Wasn't like one of the cool kids or wasn't the best musician or the best singer. And, but I also think there's a certain element to that exists in everyone where you feel like you're not fully one of something, And I also think that's a byproduct of being a songwriter, or maybe being a songwriter is a byproduct of that you feel like an outsider and you have something to say in the way of commentary or observation.
Well, how does it work for you? I mean, because when you came out, I mean, what year was Tuesday Night? That was
94.
Yeah, 93, 94. I thought there was a complete different musical landscape as to what was popular.
Yeah.
Like, you weren't playing what was popular. And
no, which was one of the reasons it was shocking that it did as well as it did, because it just didn't sound like anything else.
Right. Do you find trouble relating to whatever's going on right now? I mean, again, you dabble in the country world, and hot country is one of the biggest genres sales-wise out there. But, as you're talking about all the indie bands out there, I mean, do you find yourself, do you know where you are in the musical landscape?
Well, I don't know if I exist in the musical landscape anymore because I'm, hey, I'm an elder statesman, as I like to say. Yeah. I'm a seasoned artist. A lot of what's at radio that we listen to on the way to school is, it's really geared towards young kids between, what do they say? The demographic is 13 to 26 or whatever. I don't know that I'm going to find a home there. Yeah. The country format I found was, it's all male singers with the exception of maybe one or two women. And it's all about hot chicks in tight jeans and, so I knew I didn't fit in there. And, but there is a great world of music that exists, like in AAA, bands like Head in the Heart, Nikki Lane, Lake Street Dive. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm constantly Shazamming our local AAA and finding awesome new music. So hopefully, I'll find my own home there. You never know.
And one of our biggest artists on the format, Gary Clark Jr.
Who
ends up on your record.
He's on my record.
How did that happen?
Same manager as me.
Yes. That's convenient.
Yeah. I've known him since, the beginning, and a great kid, but also just a great hope in the way of music, I think.
How did he end up on, beyond that, is it just making the call? And
yeah, I actually texted him and said, hey, would you play on something? He's like, yeah. We've done stuff together live. So, and I sent it to him.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just the one song?
Yeah. He sent me a bunch of options. I was like, no, don't make me choose.
You can totally hear him on there. I mean, that tone, he has crafted that out so well for himself.
Yeah. He's really great. And he's the real deal. I really am a fan.
Yeah. Have you got anybody else on the record? I guess
not
noteworthy
on this one.
that I would,
No, not on this one. I've got a lot of great players.
I haven't seen the liner notes.
And my drummer's on it, Fred Eltringham, and Josh Grange plays pedal steel and some, I think he mainly plays that. That's about it. Yeah. Mostly just me and Jeff.
And again, it sounds so full. But I guess that's maybe why it sounds so, I don't know, it is one complete sound over the whole thing. There's a few different things going on, but it works as an album. It's not a collection of singles. That's what I'm trying to get at, that works. And I will say, there is my favorite song in here, Love Will Save the Day.
Aww.
Is that the name of it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and actually that was an emotional afternoon for both Jeff and I, because Jeff had just moved to town just a few months before, and he's got a teenage boy and then a grade school boy, and they were getting acclimated to starting school, new place, and then a friend of mine, or sort of a peripheral friend of all of ours, her son, who was 14, committed suicide at one of the Brentwood Academy. Just a good family. And it just struck all of us that it's a hard time in our evolution as people to be able to hold the chaos that is around us. But for kids, for children, sometimes it's just not holdable, and so that's what the song is about. It's just really a song of hopefully encouragement and, just the promise of being loved and held.
I think we've all known someone or a family that's gone through that, and you just want to shake those kids and say, you're so young.
I know.
And it all changes, and all of this
and
goes away.
Sometimes for kids, they just can't handle it. The pressures, and with social media and all that goes on around them in their own homes, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to grow up.
Well, it did, unfortunately, I guess, bittersweetly make for this beautiful song that almost seems like the centerpiece of the record. I mean, there's the placement right there in the middle, too, but it all, to me, builds up to that, and it's just rips your heart out. And then here's side 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was an album, that's where it would be. The needle would come up after that one.
Next song on the list, though, Heartbeat Away.
Mm-hmm.
If there is something of you reclaiming some growl from, if it makes you happy, like hearing your fiery passion come out in that song.
Yeah, that was kind of a funny song because, we didn't set out to write like the epic "Give Me Shelter" cousin. Mm-hmm. We were writing and recording during the election cycle. Actually, even before the candidates before Donald Trump had gotten the nomination, before Hillary had gotten it, and that song, it started out with this kind of sinister sounding groove and bass line, and I just started writing this kind of espionage song about the corruption that exists under our noses that we're not even aware of. Mm-hmm. And even Russia entered into the picture, and it was before anything came out about Russia.
Which is
and the
amazing
election.
that you're able to
very
call
eerie,
that, right?
Super eerie. Yeah, so I listened to it, and people will think that was written after President Trump was elected, but it wasn't. It was written well before any rumblings of Russia interfering with our election, before that ever came about.
And that's the line. I mean, the heartbeat away. That's what you usually say about the vice president, like whoever that guy is the heartbeat away. But you've tied that in where, I mean, obviously calling out, the president and calling out Russia, it's sort of like, okay, this is probably the political song. But I don't know, the way the poetry goes, it's like, it's almost also a love song. Yeah.
And also that everything you need to know is just a heartbeat away, if you look closely. So it's art is a cool thing. If you can tap into something that's just in the ether, you have to consider yourself super lucky. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. And by no means is this the first time you've tried this, because, you had to sing the song Woman in the White House.
Right.
Which was a really cool song. And everyone will usually in the bios bring up, guns and Walmarts.
Right.
This is, but when you're going after this, I mean, you write great political songs. You want to write the political songs. As I see it, you're liberal in Nashville. It's.
I don't know. It's not, I don't set out to write songs that will piss off the conservative right, but I can't, it would be no way I could edit myself, or I wouldn't censor.
Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't censor myself. And there was just, I don't know, it was so prevalent, the fact that people were so vitriolic during this election cycle, so much so that I started a petition to try to limit the election cycle through change.org. I was very verbal about it. And I still stand behind that. I think that when it gets to be that length, the only people that benefit from an election cycle that long are advertisers, TV news outlets. But it just was, we were swimming in it. And so it would have been really hard for me to just ignore that and not write about it or to even try to keep it from having a presence on the record.
You see the debate going back and forth sometimes, and I love it when an artist uses their platform for the. Do you think it's an artist's job to maybe not take a side, but and even just make sure you're reflecting what's going on out there?
Yeah, I don't think it's my job to do it. Well, that's not exactly
responsibility.
True. That's not even. You know what I will say? I think art is what catalogs us or documents our evolution throughout time. You know, you can go all the way back to 1700s and classical music defined a period of romantic songwriting from the Romance period, paintings, writings, Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald. You can go back and look at who we were as a people by looking at our art, all the way back to hieroglyphics. And although I don't consider it my responsibility, I do think that what art does is give a voice to the collective conscience. And a lot of what's out there is definitely representative of where we are right now, for better or for worse. The shrinking of the attention span, being down to 6 seconds and having to put a hook in every 6 seconds. And, according to what makes a great pop song, everything really does reveal who we are at a moment in time. And I want to write songs that I feel like are, that speak to us and about us, because that's what music does. It changes the molecules in all of us. And if you're having an experience where you are listening to something and you feel like it's resonating in you, that's what it does.
Yeah. And at the same time, you're going to write about your personal life and the romance and the love songs.
That's unavoidable. Yes.
And try to throw it into one big old pot and see what kind of stew is made.
Your life informs your art, and your perception is completely formed by your life experiences. So you can't avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious what I'm missing here. When we first started this conversation, you kind of half jokingly said that there's a lot to say about this record. Like, what is there that you're needing to say about this record beyond?
That it's awesome and people should go out and download it or buy it or whatever it is people do now.
I felt like I just threw out a low-hanging fruit question there.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, one of the themes that runs all the way through the record is the presence of technology and what that's doing to our relationships with others. It connects us, and yet it is also creating a chasm between us. It's giving us the unadulterated right to speak our minds in a really super ugly way anonymously, but it's also giving us the ability to support each other. There's a song on there called Be Myself, which is the title track. And I think the objective of that song ultimately wound up being about my relationship with my kids and trying to figure out a way to help them understand that likes and dislikes on Instagrams or Facebook or whatever does not dictate whether you are popular or good. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're at right now. I can't imagine being a kid growing up with all this technology that is supposed to be telling you about you and who you are to yourself.
Yeah. You get that in roller skating too, which is a great line in there.
Yeah, put your phone away, let's roller skate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. My kids all the time, Mom, put your phone away. And you're never going to look back and think, oh, I wish I would have spent more time on my phone.
No.
No,
it's crazy. And that was a sort of a fun point to listen to in the record, because I don't know, in a way you're sort of time stamping some of these songs because you're mentioning Instagram and you're mentioning Twitter, and I don't know, I can't name a song that actually said the word MySpace or something in it, but I'm sure when you hear that now, it's going to be a giggle.
Yeah.
And in 15 years, hopefully, this vision that you're wanting of the future comes true, because I think we all need to get to that point that that you'll be able to look back and be like, that's silly.
And that's what it does. Art basically documents a moment in time, It does.
Well, it's a great record. I love it, and it's another one in your fine catalog of many great records.
Well, thank you. And Kyle, people in Radioland probably do not know that you and I are sitting in my hotel room.
Yeah.
So
it's clean. It's very clean.
I know.
Yeah. My hotel room is not this clean.
Although if you look around closely, there's like little boy underwear and PJs over there, and
you've got your stowaways too.
Real.
Yeah. My son, he does the thing. He sneaks the doll into my suitcase, and so when I open up,
that's Ducky and Piggy over there. They've been all over the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Good to talk to you.
You too. recorded in 2017 behind the album Be Myself, and recorded in a hotel room in LA. That was the first time I'd ever met Sheryl. And all of my thanks goes to all of the time she's given me over the years here, and especially with the newest interview and a heck of a record that she's got on the way called Threads. Hey, before you get out of here, you made it this far. If you're not subscribed, you might as well hit that subscribe button. Again, the interviews come out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Would love to keep you up to date. You can subscribe on YouTube, on Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. That includes iTunes and Apple Podcasts. After that, head to WFPK.org, where you can hear me every single weekday and also find some bonus episodes of this series. ConsequenceOfSound.net has your music and film news. You can find me at Twitter at Kyle Meredith and Facebook/Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.